In October 1923, a massive American cargo ship vanished in the middle of a calm sea without leaving a single piece of debris. No distress signals were ever sent, and 72 experienced sailors disappeared into thin air. The U.S. Navy conducted the largest search operation of that decade but found absolutely nothing. The ship was declared lost forever. But exactly 3 years later, in the dead of a foggy night, a young lighthouse keeper named Andrew Douglas looked through his binoculars and froze. Emerging from the thick fog was the exact same ship, sailing perfectly straight, directly toward the rocky cliffs. But what Andrew found when he stepped onto that moving graveyard would shock the entire world. This is the terrifying story of the Francis Albert, the ghost ship that defied reality. And the one man who had to uncover its darkest secret. To understand the horror Andrew Douglas felt that night, we have to go back to the year 1923. The Francis Albert was a state-of-the-art steamship, built to withstand the most violent hurricanes the Atlantic Ocean could throw at it. It was carrying a massive shipment of industrial steel from New York to Europe. The captain, John Miller, was a legendary mariner with 30 years of clean service. The weather on the week of the disappearance was perfectly clear, and the sea was as flat as glass. Yet, on the third night of their journey, the ship simply blinked out of existence. When a ship sinks, it leaves oil slicks, wooden crates, lifeboats, and debris. The Francis Albert left nothing. It was as if a giant hand had reached down from the heavens and plucked the vessel right out of the water. For 3 long years, families mourned. Theories of sea monsters and secret government weapons spread across American newspapers, and the case was eventually closed as an unsolved tragedy. Now, let's return to October 1926. Andrew Douglas was stationed at one of the most isolated lighthouses on the rugged coast of Maine. It was a miserable, stormy night with fog so thick you could barely see your own hand. At 2:15 a.m., the lighthouse's foghorn was blaring loudly, warning ships to stay away from the deadly jagged rocks surrounding the island. Suddenly, Andrew noticed a massive dark shape cutting through the fog. It wasn't flashing any lights, which was highly illegal and dangerous. Even worse, the ship was completely silent. There was no sound of a steam engine, no black smoke coming from its massive chimneys, and no voices echoing from the deck. It was moving purely on the strength of the ocean current, heading on a collision course straight for the shallow rocks right beneath the lighthouse. Knowing that hundreds of lives could be at risk, Andrew grabbed his lantern, rushed down the spiral stairs of the lighthouse, and hopped into his small wooden rescue boat. He rowed frantically through the freezing, rough waves, shouting into the darkness. But no one answered. As he got closer, his lantern illuminated the rusted bow of the massive ship. Andrew wiped the sea salt from his eyes and stared in absolute disbelief. Painted in fading white letters was the name. Francis Albert. His heart dropped. He was looking at a dead ship. Gathering his courage, Andrew managed to hook his rope ladder to the side of the giant vessel and climbed aboard. The deck was completely deserted. The wood was covered in a strange, thick layer of green sea moss, and the air smelled heavily of old salt and rot. The silence was suffocating. The only sound was the eerie creaking of the metal hull as it rocked against the waves. Andrew walked toward the captain's bridge, his boots echoing loudly. When he pushed open the heavy iron door, he expected to find skeletal remains or signs of a brutal pirate attack. Instead, what he found was far more terrifying because it made absolutely no sense. On the captain's table sat a half-eaten plate of food, completely preserved by the cold sea air. Next to it was a cup of coffee, long dried up into a dark crust. Everything was perfectly in place. The captain's logbook was open to the date, October 12, 1923. The final sentence written by Captain Miller read, "Something is calling us from beneath the fog." We have no choice but to go." Andrew's hands shook as he read the words. He realized that whatever had happened to the crew didn't happen over days or hours. It happened in a single, terrifying second. They had abandoned their food, their duties, and their lives mid-sentence. But where were they? He decided to check the lower decks and the engine room. As he walked down the dark, narrow steel corridors, the temperature plummeted until he could see his own breath. He entered the crew's sleeping quarters. The beds were neatly made. Personal letters, wedding rings, and pocket watches were left untouched on the side tables. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no damage to the ship's interior. Suddenly, the ship groaned loudly as it finally struck the shallow sandbar near the lighthouse, coming to a complete halt. At that exact moment, Andrew heard a faint, scratching sound coming from the massive cargo hold at the very bottom of the ship. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded like fingernails dragging against heavy iron. Andrew froze, his pulse racing. Reason told him to run, but curiosity pushed him forward. He walked to the heavy steel hatch of the cargo hold, unlocked the massive iron wheel, and pulled the doors open. He shone his lantern down into the pitch-black abyss. The thousands of tons of industrial steel cargo were completely gone. In their place, covering the entire floor of the massive room, were thousands of strange, unidentifiable seashells that didn't belong to any known ocean zone. And in the center of the room, scratched deeply into the iron floor over and over again, was a single word: help. Terrified out of his mind, Andrew dropped his lantern, rushed back up to the deck, and threw himself over the side of the ship, swimming frantically back to his rowboat. He rowed back to the lighthouse and immediately contacted the authorities. The next morning, the U.S. Navy launched a massive investigation. They towed the Francis Albert to a secure military port. Experts examined every inch of the ship. They confirmed it was the exact same vessel that vanished 3 years prior. The engines were completely functional, the hull was perfectly intact, and there was absolutely no physical reason why the ship should have been abandoned. But the most chilling discovery came when scientists examined the strange seashells found in the cargo hold. They discovered that these shells could only exist at the absolute bottom of the ocean, in the deepest trenches where no human or ship could ever survive the crushing water pressure. How did a surface steamship visit the bottom of the abyss and return to the surface completely undamaged? To this day, the fate of the 72 sailors of the Francis Albert remains one of the greatest maritime mysteries in American history. Some believe they walked into a dimensional rift. Others believe they encountered something ancient waking up from the deep ocean floor. Andrew Douglas resigned from his job at the lighthouse the very next week, refusing to ever look at the ocean again. He spent the rest of his life in a small desert town, far away from the sound of the waves, because he knew that whatever took that crew is still down there, waiting for the next ship to pass through the fog. If this historical mystery sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened to the crew of the Francis Albert?